Today's podcast is long overdue with a dear friend who's just launched her book tour, Emma Lovewell, the New York-based health and wellness expert, fitness professional, and the top-rated Peloton instructor for over 5 years. I am so excited to welcome Emma to the show today. She has been teaching cycling, dance, and strength classes to millions internationally for the last few years. And she's the founder of Love, Learn, Love Well, a site devoted to cultivating an authentic, well-balanced life through eating healthy and an active lifestyle. She's also the author of her newest and very first book, Live, Learn, Love Well, Lessons from a Life of Progress, Not Perfection, a memoir chronicling her incredible path to physical and mental fitness that traces her journey to becoming a beloved Peloton instructor and inspires readers to live, learn, and love well. Emma, I'm so excited to have you on the podcast today. I feel like we have been talking about this for a year, and then you happen to write a book, and I'm like, perfect timing. Come talk about it. Let's
Any
have a chit chat.
to chat with you, I think is a great excuse. So if I have to write a book in order to get on this podcast, I'll do it again.
No, I would have had you without the book. I think we just dropped the ball, and then I was like, oh my gosh. Well, first of all, congratulations on the book. How has the tour been?
It is a wild ride. I'm learning a lot, and it's busy. I'm tired, but it's all for a good cause. So I'm willing to go through this period of my life of just working really hard to just do the thing that I got to do, get the book out there and talk to as many people as I can. So I'm trying to just really enjoy the process.
Yeah, I'm sure there's a lot of adrenaline and excitement, and then you a little crash at the end of it, and then being like, wow, I can't believe this is happening. What inspired you to write your book?
Yeah, I think that I've always wanted to write a book since I was a kid. I just never really knew when. I think in the back of my head, I was like, oh, I'll write a book when I'm like 70 years old, or like I've lived a really long life. And but then the opportunity presented itself to write one now. And so my initial response was like, is now the right time? I don't know. And because it was like a little bit scary for me, and I always love to say, like, get out of your comfort zone, like do it while afraid. I was like, maybe this is the time because it scares me.
Yeah.
And I feel like, people know me from the Peloton platform. People know they take my fitness classes. I tell stories about myself in short little sound bites in between intervals. And I was like, I have more stories to tell. I want to take the time to tell longer stories about my life and also things that I've learned. And if people are willing to read it, then I should be willing to write it.
Yeah, I think putting yourself out there, especially when it's more of a memoir and lessons you've learned, it's a vulnerability that a lot of people write, at least for me, writing my first 2 books, they're science and blood sugar books. No one can judge me personally for it. I mean, you'd be surprised, but it was just, it's just kind of like you really have to be strong and able to do that.
Yep.
But it was a beautiful read, and it was really nice to learn about, your childhood and how you've come all the way full circle to being, the most popular Peloton instructor in the world, which is just crazy. I mean, to think. So let's start from the beginning. You were born and raised on Martha's Vineyard, and for most people, I think they think, "Ooh, this is a luxurious upbringing." But what was it like?
Yeah. And I mean, Martha's Vineyard is beautiful. So if you don't know it, it is, off the coast of Cape Cod of Massachusetts. And it is such a stunning place. And I think growing up there, I didn't know it was an unusual place to grow up until I left because that's all I knew. And then when I got to college, people were like, that's pretty strange that you grew up there. There were no shopping malls. You don't have fast food. You don't have highways, no stoplights. And then I was like, oh, you're right. Maybe that is a little strange.
Yeah.
But I think it's an interesting place because there's just a lot of wealth there, especially the summertime people that come. And like any touristy place that anybody has ever been to, you know that it's quite different for the locals than it is for the tourists. And so, there is still money amongst local people as well, but there's also a very significant working class population. And, my parents, my dad's a writer for the newspaper. My mom's a gardener. Growing up, she was a substitute teacher and a waitress and, had a number of jobs. And I think I learned my hard work ethic from my mom, who's also an immigrant. She's originally from Taiwan. And I just think, it's interesting. Like a lot of my friends' parents all owned business, like worked for a small business or owned a business. There were no big corporations. So growing up, I didn't know like, oh, you could, go work for a big bank or a big PR agency. Like I didn't know about all that stuff. It was like, oh, you're an English teacher, you own a pizza shop, or you build houses.
Yeah.
And which is kind of funny, right? And like, I talked to my partner Dave, who grew out outside of New York City. So all of his friends' parents were like worked in New York City and had an office job. So I think that's kind of interesting because I grew up with an entrepreneurial spirit just because that's what was around me. And my brother and I both are entrepreneurs. And my brother owns a seafood business in California called Real Good Fish. Go check it out. Yeah, so I think it was just like such a beautiful and safe place to grow up. But it was an interesting place for me, especially, growing up mixed race. It's a very white community. So there were a lot of times where I felt very othered, like I didn't fit in and I wasn't sure why. And all I wanted to do as a kid was to fit in. But I also learned a lot of important things like how to be creative, how to, create a life that I wanted to live, being an entrepreneur. And also like how to be able to talk to all kinds of people. I don't know if you ever worked in like a restaurant, but I was a waitress and a bartender and like all the different types of people that come into restaurants. You have to learn how to, all the different types of tourists that would come to Martha's Vineyard. I feel like I also acquired that skill of like how to talk to anybody.
That's a really good skill, especially as an entrepreneur, because you never know like who's going to walk in your bar, who's going to be in your Peloton class, or who's going to come to your book signing. Like, yeah, that's a priceless skill for kids and for adults alike. It's interesting to me that you had, it makes sense that you had challenges being biracial in a very white community and feeling a little bit like you didn't fit in. But to be so outgoing and open and have ease talking to anyone, where do you attribute that confidence from?
And I write about this in my book of just, I used to think that being good meant being quiet. And so there was a large part of my childhood where I was just like the good, quiet kid. And, my mom was kind of a tiger mom. Like I had to go to piano lesson. I had to go to piano lessons every week. I had to practice every day for 30 minutes. We had some, strict rules and I had to behave and be a good kid. And to me, being good was just like being quiet. And I think though that my dad's a musician and my mom's a painter, gardener. They're very creative. And so I fell in love with music at a young age. And I was a dancer. I was in band. I was entering the lip sync contest. I have a whole chapter about the lip sync contest where I was like, I found my voice, even though I never even had to open my mouth or like say a word. So there was something in there about my love of music and performance that I think sort of like cracked me open. And like, thank God I had that because it was such a powerful outlet for me. And I think it's part of the reason why I have the job now that I have as a Peloton instructor is because I love music. I love moving and I love performance. And so I think it's just like an odd combination of all those things that really just allowed me to crack open a little bit. And then once I got to college, and I think that really encouraged me and like lit my fire to open my mouth and to speak my mind. So I think, yes, all that combination of music, performance, and then also like having the need to want to speak up for myself and needing to speak up for myself and like my family, that really allowed me to crack open.
So when you look back on your childhood, it sounds like your mom was obviously a major inspiration in your life. Her work ethic, her drive, the things that she, loved very much that you have taken into your life and made so much a part of your life, like your gardening and your meditation and things of that nature. When you look at her influence on you and being connected to your Taiwanese background, what are your favorite parts about that relationship with your mom and being able to like really live that side of you?
I think, yeah, it's taken me a while to like step into myself and my identity. And I've always kind of straddled this line of being like, am I Asian enough? Am I white enough? Like, where do I fit in with my Asian friends? I was always like their white friend. And with my white friends, I was always their Asian friend. I'll say that that journey of like self discovery and identity is an ongoing thing forever. Um, but I think that my mom has taught me a lot about, like I said, because she's an immigrant, she worked really hard and she always had multiple jobs. And I think I just really learned that from her. Like she worked so hard because she wanted a better life for us than she had. And so for me, I've always had multiple jobs. I've always been like a hustler, I've just been like
Yeah.
make it work. And so I appreciate that because I worked really hard for some of the things that I have now, and so I'm proud of that. I'm proud that I can say that I've worked really hard for these things. Some other like more superficial things, but very important, is my mom is a phenomenal cook, and I think that I learned that from her. Just growing up, like we often cooked. Or I watched her cook, or I helped her cook. And don't get me wrong, like this was the 90s. We definitely had TV dinners every once in a while. We would like sit in front of the TV and have this microwaved like crappy meal in front of us. But for the most part, like learning how to garden from my mom, grow our own food, cook the food, like knowing how much work goes into that whole process is definitely something I've learned from my mom and I really value, especially now.
I know it's really fun to watch your gardening, like that side of you on Instagram and just like when you share that. How long ago did you get into it for you personally? And what are like your favorite things to grow and cook from your garden?
Yeah, when I was a kid, I was a little embarrassed by gardening because it was like gross and a lot of work in my mind as a kid. If we had a
Mhm.
compost and I have like a whole section in the book about composting. And so I think that should be funny for anybody who grew up composting. I have like
Yeah.
trauma from composting
Yeah.
because it was so like, you'd go outside after dinner, it's dark out, there's all kinds of animals, like the flashlight never worked. You smelled terrible. I'd be like throwing all this food in the general direction of the compost. Um, but then every spring when we're getting the garden ready, it was like that was gold. That is what makes the produce grow, the vegetables grow. And so I think I was just like, not a lot of my friends had gardens or their parents didn't garden. And I think gardening can be like a luxury, but it can also be a necessity and used for sustenance. And that was definitely my family.
Mhm.
My mom was getting seeds of like, Chinese vegetables, like, because you couldn't get that on Martha's Vineyard. She'd be like growing these exotic Chinese vegetables in our garden. I loved it and I hated it. I had a love hate relationship. When I got to college, when I moved to New York City, I was I'm in New York City. I'm in a concrete jungle. There's not a lot of greenery around me. And so I started getting into just house plants. And so I started having house plants and they kind of just reminded me of home and gave me a little like bit of nature in my apartment. And I started appreciating it more. And I'd go home to visit my mom and I'd be like, wow, we have this amazing vegetable garden. Like, this is spectacular. And then I had an apartment in the East Village where we had this concrete courtyard that was for the whole building, but nobody ever used it. And one day I was just like, it was in the spring and I was like, what if I just made my own garden back there? And I was newly dating Dave at the time, my partner, and he was like, yeah, let's do it. And so he helped me and we built all these garden boxes. We like hauled dirt in the back. We set it all up and then realized there was no water back there. And I was
Oh
on the
no.
second floor. So I'm like carrying buckets. I got like these Poland Spring barrels and that was my first like urban garden. And it was so fun because it was pretty prolific. It was so hot. Like the cement was so hot, but like the tomatoes and the peppers and the basil grew so well. And it was a lot of work, but it was really fun. And it kind of just gave me this like nostalgic little comfort. And that made me feel like I was home.
It's interesting now because I know you don't live in the city anymore. You live outside the city. What was the calling like back to nature, and when did you decide to take that step? Because I know you pop back into the city for all your classes and your
Yep.
live classes.
Yep.
What's the importance there for you to have that space? Because thinking like growing up on Martha's Vineyard and all that beauty, and then to need that kind of like later in life too.
Yeah, I know. And, you know, people say like we all like end up coming back to home or like we end up being like our parents, even no matter how hard we try not to be.
Yeah.
Um, so I think Dave and I both, you know, we grew up kind of in a country setting. So we both love nature and we would prioritize going snowboarding, surfing, you know, getting out of the city for all of a lot of trips and spending time in nature. And so I think it was at the start of the pandemic, Dave was just like, let's leave the city. Like, let's just rent a place for a little bit and just to get out of here. And I was like, okay, I actually like wasn't that excited to because I was like, everything's going to go back to normal. Just be like 2 weeks, you know? And so, yeah, we ended up renting a place outside of the city and it was like just like a nice little like gateway into, you know, life outside the city where I was like, oh wait, this is nice. And like there was this, you know, farmers market nearby. There's like all this local produce. I had a little garden and, you know, ended up spending the whole summer there. And then we decided to buy a house and like make it permanent and move out of the city. And I think it's just like sometimes I don't like it. Sometimes the commute is a lot and I'm annoyed at how much time I spend in a car. But then once I'm here and you can see this backdrop is like, it is beautiful. There are trees. I have an amazing garden. I have two gardens. I have a flower garden that's fenced in and I have a vegetable garden that's fenced in. Um, we have a big lawn and it's just like so nice to when you're in the city grinding and you're around all this energy, which I love, but then to be able to come home and have it be like chill and quiet is really nice. It's really nice.
Absolutely. I think it's just like phenomenal for your nervous system too, because you have to be on in your Peloton classes. You have to be, and now with your book tour, like you're going to have to be on for weeks, like just, interviews and news stations and all the things. So it is good. It's probably really good for you to just have that time.
Totally.
Looking back, I'm curious, Peloton, it feels like it came out of nowhere. Like it was just like, whoa, what's this company? Oh my gosh, they're everywhere. Everyone has a Peloton. When you look back on your journey, like how did you get to where you are today? Like where did it really start? And then what made you pull the trigger and go for the interview at Peloton?
My story of how I got to Peloton definitely feels like a story of like a full circle moment, multiple full circle moments. It just feels like it's meant to be. Like there were so many pieces that brought me there that if it wasn't this piece would have brought me there. If it wasn't that piece, it was this piece that would have brought me there. There's so many angles in which brought me to Peloton. I mean, even as a kid, I was an athlete. And so I always grew up playing sports. I was also a dancer and a musician, as I said. And so having all that in my back pocket was helpful. When I moved to New York City to pursue dance, I was on auditions all the time. I did some fitness modeling as well. So this is at the time when all these brands are wanting like, average size, like regular size
models instead of like 6-foot models. So I'm like 5'6", 5'7", and all these brands wanted like fitness models. So even if they weren't fitness brands, sure, Adidas, Nike, Under Armour, but then there was also the like, I can't even, Tory Burch had like a fitness line. Like there were all these like fashion brands that were coming out with fitness clothes. And so I was booking some of that work as a dancer / model. And then I ended up, I was taking a lot of fitness classes because my friends were all fitness instructors and I needed to stay in shape. And so I was taking a lot of classes. And then I got an audition to be in a Peloton Kickstarter campaign. So I had never heard of the brand. It was 2012. They were brand new. And I was to play a home rider in this commercial where I basically am like, oh, I want to take a spin class, but it's raining outside and it's so inconvenient. But oh, I have this bike at home. Like, let me just take a class here. And I remember meeting, the CEO, the small team that was there on set. They were lovely. And, John Foley was the founder and CEO. And I said to him after the shoot, I was like, thank you. Like, best of luck to you guys. Like, this seems like you're on a great journey. Like, good luck, Yeah. And I left that day. I continued to teach fitness for a few years. I was getting all my certifications in Pilates, personal training, TRX, spin. And I was just kind of like watching Peloton, on Facebook or like seeing all their, articles in Wall Street Journal and Forbes. And I was like, wow, they're really doing well. And so I came to this point in my life, and you'll get all of this in the book. So if you read the book, then you know this. But I was in California at the time feeling like very lost. I had quit a great job in New York, moved to California to see if that would work. Well, first had a stint in Texas, which you'll really have to read the book to figure how did this all make sense? Ended up in California, was feeling very stuck, very lost. Like I had just left behind something better than what I was doing. And Dave, my partner, was like, why don't you email John Foley, the CEO of Peloton, and just see if there are any job opportunities? And I was like, are you kidding me? I don't just email CEOs. Like, who do you think I am? And, but then I was like, he was like, what do you have to lose? And I was like, okay, Dave, maybe you're right. So I emailed the CEO, I closed my laptop, like paced around the apartment, was like, I can't believe I just sent this email. Yeah. And he wrote back in 20 minutes and was just like, great, like let's I'm going to have Robin Arzon call you. She's the head of fitness programming, and she'll give you a call and, you can come in and audition. I was like, amazing. Right. And, and I talk about this in the book, is like, you have to take these leaps of faith. Right. But that's not the only, so after that, Robin didn't call me. And so I had to follow up with John and say, again, and be like, hey, sorry, I haven't heard from her. And so that's like another moment of stepping out of my comfort zone. And then I talked to Robin on the phone. She was lovely, but she was like, we're not actually really hiring right now. And I was like, oh, and she's like, but if you want to send a video of you on a bike, or if you happen to be back in New York, you can come in and audition. And so I know how these things work. As a dancer, I'm like, a video of me on a crappy iPhone on a bike is not going to do me justice. I'm booking a flight to New York. And that's exactly what I did. And so there was just many, many steps in that process where I had to jump out of the comfort zone, because it's not enough to just like take a risk once. You have to continue to keep taking risks and putting yourself out there, I think. And that's the long-winded story of how I got to Peloton, but it's all in the book. So you'll get all the juicy details.
Well, it's funny. I mean, I had sort of the same experience. I was like, I want to write a book. I'm going to cold email some agents and then book a flight to New York, and you're like, I don't know. Like you have to have those moments where you put yourself out there and you kind of feel like a fool, and you're like, well, I guess if they never write me back, they never write me back, but also knowing that you have to invest in yourself and believe in yourself to buy the flight, to get out there, to do the audition in person, knowing that people just connect better in person, and you can close the deal,
Yeah. And I'll share that I didn't share this in the book or publicly, but the reason why I have my agent today is same situation. I was like, I need to find an agent. Like I'm, I have all these opportunities coming and I don't know what I'm doing. I'm negotiating deals and reading contracts and I'm not qualified to be doing any of this.
Yeah.
And you can't just like call an agency and be like, give me an agent. Like you have to have some sort of referral or recommendation. And so Dave, once again, was like, why don't you find some agents on LinkedIn and just message them? I was like, Dave, you're crazy. Like, with all these ideas. And so I emailed, I just messaged like 5 or 6 different agents. And one of them got back to me and was like, I take your classes and let's get on a call. Let's have a meeting. And you know what? I don't think I ever heard from the other 4, but it's like, I don't even think about that now. What I think about is like the fact that I ended up signing with, a big agency all because I reached out.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's just such a reminder that sometimes it just takes an email and one call, and it only ever takes one person believing in you or having that interconnection where oh, wow, like this person's been taking your classes. They know who you are. They have a general idea of like your work ethic and your personality and like how you'd probably be to work together. Like it's so cool. It's so cool. Yeah, because I think a lot of people who see someone like you would say like, wow, she has a super big career and she's doing all these amazing things, and you are, but they think that there's something really hard about creating that. And I think it's just the constant belief in yourself of like, send the email, pick up the phone, make the call, ask again, show up again, it's
and maybe it took me having like a Dave in my life. Like maybe you need a Dave in your life to be like, just email the CEO, just reach out on LinkedIn, Yeah. And I think I needed that because I otherwise would have maybe played it more safe. And there's just like so much, and there's no guarantee. You reach out, you're not guaranteed to hear a response, but
right.
Yeah.
We love Dave.
Yeah.
Dave really is. Dave, if you're tuning in, really grateful for you. Thank you so much.
You,
Emma
Dave.
has a big, full career, and you remind her every day how amazing she is. And so that gives, so good to have the confidence to get out there. And speaking of confidence, what is it like teaching a Peloton class to probably like, I don't even know, is it like thousands of people taking your live classes at a time? And what was it like the first time?
Yeah, I think I'm not 100% sure, but I think our current record for live rioters is something like 50,000. Maybe it's more than that. I don't even know. But at the time when I first started my first premier ride, I had 2,300 people on the leaderboard, and that was the record at the time. And I knew that, and I'm like, oh my God, I'm breaking the record. Like, this is crazy. And I think I blacked out. Like, I don't totally remember everything, but I remember how I felt. I remember being like so excited and just so energized. And I saw, in the front row was like a bunch of my coworkers, my colleagues were all riding, like smiling and beaming up at me. And I loved that. And they've always, since the first day, have been so supportive. Some people ask me, like, do you think about who you're teaching to? And I will say that I definitely do, in the way that I'm like, there are politicians taking this class. There are thought leaders, decision makers, important people who take my classes. So if I wanted to give a message, what would it be? And mostly it's like, let's work together, like let's believe in ourselves. It's a very positive, optimistic. I hope there's more, tolerance for different types of people. You can be accepting of other people, even if you don't understand them, like that sort of messaging. And then I also think about the fitness levels, right? We have actual Olympic athletes taking my class. And then we have like Susan in Missouri who's never taken a fitness class ever. And they're taking the same exact class. So I think about all of those people when I teach, for sure. And that's why we give a wide range of, cadence and resistance. And for all fitness levels, we give modifications. And I try to really just kind of tune in with like messaging that feels universal, like for me too, like what I need to hear when I'm going through a hard climb or a tough interval or a recovery, or if I'm feeling hard on myself, like what are the things that I need to hear? And usually usually other people need to hear that as well. And so it kind of just works out. I think, when you're teaching to tens of thousands of people, you're not every single person's gonna relate to you, but a large portion of them will. And I think that that's pretty cool. And I think that's why we've been able to create such deep connection through a screen, is by really just like, for me to be authentic to myself and speak from my own experience and know that there are a lot of people that might relate to me as well.
100%. Your classes and what you give off is a very inclusive feeling, a very optimistic, like you said, inspiring message. I think what really resonates with me from who you are and what you share in your classes and the book is always that theme of like progress, not perfection, because at least in my line of work, I really find that like when someone gets to a place of perfection and it isn't something they can, or they're trying to attain that perfection, it's so hard on themselves.
Yeah.
And we don't get the progress we're looking for, because it's like, if it's not perfect, throw in the towel. I feel it and I see it when I take your classes and when even reading your book. Why do you think that's such an important theme for you personally?
I think I am a perfectionist in a lot of ways. And so that's something that I've used to help myself, like progress, not perfection. That's a phrase that I say that helps me, because I can be really hard on myself. I want the best, the best, the best. But I realize like once you hit that, it's elusive. It's not actually there. Like then there is something else. I have this friend who was like a famous childhood actor. And I remember him telling me this years ago. And he was just like, when I was a kid, I wanted to be famous. And that was like my goal, is that like, I just want people to recognize me and people to know me. And he's like, and then once I got there, it wasn't, I was totally unfulfilled, and it wasn't actually what I thought. And then I just wanted more of it. And then it was like never attainable. And so it was like this empty dream that like was so unfulfilling. And I was like, oh, that's very interesting. And so sometimes I think about it like that, where it's like, you think you want this like ideal thing of perfection, but it's constantly moving. So it's not a standstill destination. And so you're always chasing it and it's always moving and you never actually get there. And then you're never fulfilled because you never actually get there. So it's like, just, and this is like a cheesy overused saying that like, enjoy the process, like trust the process. But it's like that, we say that all the time because it's true. It's like, enjoy the journey. You have to, it's much more fulfilling, I think. And like, you can live a more peaceful life when you're just focusing on bettering yourself in small incremental ways on a daily basis, and not striving for some ideal of perfection, which there's no such thing as perfect. So you're just striving for something that doesn't exist.
Yeah.
And like, what a much better existence to be like, and like, you have children, like if you saw your kid being like, I need to be perfect, you'd be like, chill, like you have your whole life. You will not be happy in this lifetime if you're constantly striving for perfection. And I think it's just taking some of the pressure off to be like, I am good enough today, and I can still work on being better simultaneously while like loving myself now and loving myself for where I'm going. I think those are important tools for sure.
With the focus on progress, you can be grateful for like what you've attained instead of like the mark you've missed, which
Right.
like you said is like constantly moving.
And like in my book, I talk about taking side steps or back steps. Like when I was in California, I feel like I took a back step. But when you look at the overall progress, like I needed to take that back step to launch me to where I was going, which was Peloton. If I didn't go there, if I didn't go to California and be like, what am I doing here? I might have never ended up at Peloton, So like sometimes success is not linear and you need to go through all the ups and downs. And progress is not always like linear, it kind of, there's a reason why there are ups and downs, and they're necessary to get you to where you're going.
Definitely. So one of the things that you talk about in the book too is the journey not being linear, and to write your goals in pencil. And can you explain what you mean by that? I mean, people should go read the book, but
yeah. I mean, it's along the same lines of progress, not perfection. Is like, for me, one of those tools is, writing my goals down and speaking them out into existence. I think it's important to say them out loud. And you can also say them to nobody. You can just say them to the universe. You don't have to declare to everybody, what your goal is. But if you just speak it out into existence, into the world, into the universe, I think that's helpful. But I also just know how much life throws at you and how much circumstances can change in an instant. And I would rather focus on being like flexible and being able to acclimate or change. And whether, that's changing the actual goal or changing the way that you get there, it's like, you just have to know that just because something didn't work out doesn't mean that you failed, right? It's like, just change your course, like just change a little bit. And I think, this is all different too and I'm sure the way that you give like nutrition advice to like a athlete who's training for like a race versus just like a person who's trying to live a healthy, long, happy life. And so, yes, in fitness, if you want to train for some crazy race, like maybe don't take my advice.
Yeah.
Because you're going to have like a regimen and you have your goal and you're going to be like fixated on this. But I think for like the average person who just wants to live, like when you train for something, when an athlete trains for something, it's not forever, right? You're in a training season, you're going hard, and then you go back to like regular life.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, if you have some, training goals and you need to write that stuff down in permanent marker, do it. But for like the average person, when you just want to like be kinder to yourself and be able to acclimate to different situations, I think, writing your goals down in pencil is just like a great way to be flexible and patient with yourself and have a little more grace.
Mm-hmm. I always think it's interesting. I'll happily tell all my friends like my goals out loud. Like I remember it was like maybe in 2014, I was like, it was New Year's. It's like, I'm going to write a book this year. And my friends were like, okay, Kelly, here we go. And it was 3 years after that before my first book came out. But I don't think, I think speaking things into existence and saying your goals or writing them down, but like not being so rigid about the timeline, because it's always, life happens, and as long as you aren't completely erasing the goal, unless it's no longer a goal, like just even having it out there, you're moving in that direction,
Totally.
And so I totally agree. What, when you think about your goals for the future and, you're working at Peloton, you have your gardens, your flower garden and your food garden, edible garden, and you and Dave are living that nature life, slightly a commuting issue, but, like, what would you like to see happen in your life for the next like 3 to 5 years? What are some goals that you have for yourself personally?
I mean, writing this book was a huge milestone for me. That was something that's like a life milestone of like, wow, I did that. And, maybe, I don't know if I'd write another book in the next 3 to 5 years, but at some point, maybe I would write another book.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like that's maybe in the future. I think starting a family is probably in the future.
Yay! Cute little Emma's running around.
Yeah, I mean, we have 2 cats that we love very much, and I think that was like our experiment with parenting. I can keep plants alive, so like I think I might be able to keep kids alive. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think I'm like I love what I get to do, and I love helping people and inspiring people. And so whatever ways that I can do that, and there's so many different modalities now of like television, podcasts, books. Um, I'm doing a lot more public speaking now. So that's a new thing that I'm kind of taking on that I've been enjoying because it's challenging for me.
Mhm.
But yeah, I think all of those things to continue to just like be able to live my life in a way that I hope inspires people and to connect with people and share that with people.
You're definitely already doing that, Emma. And it's exciting to watch and super I'm I'm really proud of you for writing this book. I think, especially if you were scared of it and now it's out there, and it's such a good message and exactly who you are. That positive outlook, very optimistic, inclusive, like just it's you. It's very clearly you and it's really,
Very
really
me.
good. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, before we wrap up today, I just want to know, you clearly have a great workout regimen, routine. But when it comes to taking care of yourself and other self-care ways, what are like the most important things that are in your day and how you take care of yourself?
Yeah, I will give Kelly a little credit here too, because my smoothie game is like next level after I first met Kelly. And I was like, this is what I put in my smoothie. She's like, that's great. Maybe just add a little more of this. And I was like, great. And now I feel like I start my day with an amazing smoothie. But yeah, nutrition for me is huge. Like when I am feeling like, okay, I need to really take care of myself, I just really focus on abundance instead of scarcity. I never like cut things out. I more just say like, okay, I'm going to add vegetables. I'm going to try to eat something green at every meal. Like that's something that I try to focus on. And that always just like makes me feel better.
Yeah.
Physically and mentally. So I do that. I try to make sure that I'm not working too much, which is hard because I work hard and I work a lot. But that is why like having an outdoor space is super important. Like there are times where I'm like, I just need to go outside and like just walk in the grass barefoot for like 20 minutes and just putter around the garden for a little bit because I feel like that is therapeutic to me. It helps ground me. And and I take my recoveries pretty seriously. I make sure that I get physical therapy a few times a month and just try to really like listen to my body. I do talk therapy as well. I have a therapist. And so I'm such an advocate for taking care of yourself for sure. And so I think for me, it's just been a journey of like trying all the things and then figuring out what sticks and what works for me and what actually makes me feel good. And then I do that. And I know even if I, fall off a little bit and I leave some of those things behind, or I haven't had a vegetable in yet today, then I know I have these tools. I have this toolkit of things I can go back to that I know will always make me feel better. And also that list can change over time, where something used to work for me doesn't work for me anymore. So I think it's just like, I always advocate for people to like get to know themselves really well, like intimately, because you get to live with yourself for the rest of your life. So hopefully you should enjoy spending time with that person and taking care of that person because that's what's going to keep us. That's what's going to keep you around.
Definitely. It's great advice for anyone listening. Just the abundance piece, like adding talk therapy, adding physical therapy, adding a vegetable, like adding water, like,
Yeah.
adding a smoothie, like whatever it is, that's a totally different mindset than
Right.
saying
I'm not
like,
telling you like, don't watch Netflix.
yeah,
Watch
yeah,
that. I watch a lot of TV.
yeah. No, it's really good. It's a lot easier to attain that and to set your goals on adding an abundance than it is to be in a deprivation mindset because it just changes everything. So
Totally.
such good stuff, Emma. I'm so excited for you. Where can people snag the book? Where can they follow along?
So you can follow me on Instagram, TikTok, Twitter at Emma Lovewell. And you can find my book at all places where books are sold. And I have an audiobook that I am narrating myself. So go ahead and check those out.
Oh, that was always such a fun process. You're like, I'm going to read my all couple hundred pages of this,
Yep.
my own book.
Yep.
Oh, that's awesome though. It's way better when the author reads it. So much
I
more
bet
fun to
so.
listen to. Good for
Totally.
you. I
Thank
know
you.
some people will just be like, I'll just get the voiceover person to do it, but so much better when it's the author.
Great.
Oh, Emma, I'm so happy for you. Congratulations on your new book and all of the success. I'm excited for you to have some downtime this summer, hopefully. The lead up, the writing, and then the promotion and the lead up and all of it. It's a lot, but totally worth it. And you'll get to kind of just soak it up this summer. So I'm still waiting for you to be a New York Times bestseller. I think we have a couple more days before you find out.
Right. Everyone go buy
Definitely
the book.
celebrate that. Yeah, celebrate that with you. But congratulations.
Thank you so much, Kelly. Thanks for having me on your podcast.
Awesome.